Hello, my name is Isabella Webb. Welcome class, as this is my final presentation. Today, I'm going to be talking about evaluating prisoner reentry programs. What works, what doesn't, and why are recidivism rates so stubbornly high. But first, why is this topic important? Well, this topic is important because it highlights what is done well in this country in regards to prisoner reentry programs and what is not in terms of what is not being done for prisoner reentry programs. This presentation also brings attention to the massive number of individuals who go back to jail and prison. Our recidivism rate is around 70%. I got this information from one of our PowerPoints in this course, so I'm sure you all remember. Lastly, I am a firm believer in the idea that education can bring about change. Now, of course, just this class and just you and I knowing about these recidivism rates is probably not going to bring about change. We don't really have that power, but by word of mouth, you could tell somebody else could tell somebody else, and it can keep going. And then eventually, millions of individuals could know, and that can bring about change. Before we talk about what works, what doesn't work, and why the rates are so high, we have to talk about what is a prisoner reentry program. Well, according to ncdps.gov, a prisoner reentry program is an array of reentry programs, services, and resources to help justice-involved individuals rebuild their lives and successfully reintegrate into their communities. The goal is to begin connecting individuals with resources before they leave incarceration so that support is already in place when they return to their home communities. In hearing this and reading this, one would think that this sounds amazing. Well, let's see what works in terms of prisoner reentry programs. Prison-based educational and vocational training programs work. According to a journal article that I read from 2013, prisoners who earned a college degree stay crime-free in the community longer than their matched comparison group. This essentially means that taking those education programs and then being able to apply it when they get out doesn't return them back to prison. That's because we're giving them that resource. Next thing that works is a prison-based substance abuse program. Many prisoners who enter the system suffer from substance abuse. Often there is little to no help. The ITC, in-prison therapeutic community treatment, especially when followed by residential aftercare, was effective for reducing post-release recidivism rates. And this was from a journal article I read that was from 1999. This essentially means that when they are given that help on how to fight their addictions, they prosper and they don't go back into prison. One of the main reasons why people go back into prison is for drugs. If they're not addicted to those drugs anymore with the help of these substance abuse programs, it eliminates the problem. The last thing that works that I have found in research is medical and psychiatric attention. Many prisoners are denied the basic right to health care and told their symptoms are not real. Many inmates do not respond favorably to standard treatments routinely offered in prison too, which means that they don't trust the people that are trying to help them, if they're trying to help them. That's important. In addition, psychologists push for mental health care to be brought into prisons. And I read this information from Fishbein. It was also a journal article created in 2009. And I would like to mention that all of these journal articles that are within this PowerPoint are peer-reviewed as well. So on the left, we have an example of what would look like a therapy session. I think that everybody needs a little therapy, even if you don't suffer from a mental health disorder, just because it's nice to have a sounding board and to talk about what problems you have in life. And I think that this is especially true for criminals. They need someone to talk about too, figure out why they committed the crime that they did. And then here we have on the right, a group of prisoners who are in an education program. So what does not work? Well, no education or vocational training. About 9 in 10 state prisons, all federal prisons, and almost 9 in 10 private prisons provide educational programs for their inmates. This is from the Office of Justice Programs or the US Department of Justice. But here's the key. Less than 50% participate. So while you have that educational program there, less than 50% participate. And that's partially because of the negative environment, and we are going to be talking about that in a couple seconds. What also doesn't work is no help on substance abuse. Most inmates who are released who have had a substance abuse problem go back to addiction. And according to Simpson, in a journal article from 2009 that I read, some even obtain one through medicine that was prescribed. Picture this. You get severely injured in prison. A doctor prescribes you high medication pain pills like Percocets. They don't wean you off of those pills correctly, but because you became acclimated to them, when you get out, you are therefore addicted. And then you seek those drugs when you are out, and that'll often bring you back into prison. We'll talk about that later too. What also doesn't work is there's no mental or physical help. A journal article I read from 2014 from G and others, the psychological therapies are widely considered within the forensic literature as holding a useful role in the prison system. However, despite this, very little research into the psychological therapies has taken place. This means that research deems psychological therapies useful. And the fact that there are no further research on this in actual prisons, it means that it is not being taken place. It's not happening. That's a problem. And lastly, which is probably the most obvious, is the negative environment in terms of what does not work. Guards are constantly berating and putting down prisoners. Imagine being told every day that you are nothing, that you are stupid. Most of these inmates don't even have a GED from high school. So how are they going to believe that they could receive a degree in college if they are being told every day that they are stupid? They wouldn't even want to get a GED. They wouldn't even want to get a degree. And what is sad, but also true, is they're often threatened a lot. These are some images of what does not work. On the left, we have an inmate who is being taken down by 5 or more corrections officers. I'm sorry. In what world do you need 5 guards, more than 5 guards, because this doesn't even show the entire picture, I believe. In what world do you need all of those people for one person? It's threatening, and then they mean it to be threatening, and they want to be harmful. Here we have on the right a picture of an overcrowded prison. Not only is this a negative environment, but it can spread diseases. It can create fights within inmates. And that's an entirely other problem. It's not okay, and it needs to change. So, why are the recidivism rates so high? Well, one reason is that people who go to prison for mental health or substance abuse go to prison instead of a psychiatric and restorative facility. This means that for the addicts of the world who are not with the intent of selling, are being thrown in jail and thrown in prison with extremely high bail rates, which means that they're going to stay there, instead of being sent to rehab. Or some of these individuals with psychological disorders, like antisocial personality, which we will talk about in a second. They have a psychological disorder, which means that they need to be treated in a psychiatric facility, and they're not. According to Matusau in 2012 peer-reviewed journal article that I read, drug treatment courts are an increasingly important tool. Here's the kicker: they're not used. That's a problem. Why else are recidivism rates so high? Well, a study that was done in 2018 found that gender and antisocial personality behavior can create a higher chance of return in an individual. They found that the rate for males are 19% to be reintroduced back into prison, and then antisocial personality has around 13%, and antisocial behavior has around 12%, which combines for a 25% chance of going back to prison. Now, if these psychological problems were treated in the prison, these antisocial personalities and behaviors would not even be there. Next, why are recidivism rates so high? There are employment barriers and policies. Raphael, in a study from 2011, noted that policies have changed since 1970. It's not the criminals, it's the policies. In the film The 13th, we were introduced into some of the policies that can bring criminals back into crime through the war on drugs, the war on crime. We've seen that policies are putting people in prison, not necessarily people are changing. In addition, we have employment barriers. A lot of times, people who are out of prison do not get a job after prison, not only because they are not getting help, but also because they have that on their record. And a lot of employers will not employ someone who was a quote unquote criminal. And lastly, why are the recidivism rates so high? In my opinion, it's the overall treatment of prisoners. In my last presentation, I noted that the 13th Amendment counts criminals as people who could be treated as slaves. And we see in our society, in America specifically, that they are treated like slaves. If you're treated like slaves and you're treated like a criminal, you're going to become a criminal. You're going to do what everybody tells you that you've been doing, because that's just how people work. So, in conclusion, I talked to you all about prisoner reentry programs, what works, what doesn't, and why recidivism rates are so high. I hope you all enjoyed my presentation. This is my references and works cited page. Since there was a discrepancy last week about whether I'm getting my sources from a reputable source and journal articles, you can clearly see these are all journal articles, and as I stated, these are all peer-reviewed. I hope you guys have had a wonderful time watching me this semester, and I have had a wonderful time enjoying watching you all. I hope the best for all of you and future success in your future endeavors. Have a great rest of the semester, year, anything. Goodbye, guys.